So, vermicomposting, what's it all about? So what's vermi anyways? What's that mean? Well, vermi is the Latin word for worm. Interestingly enough, according to the online etymological dictionary, the Italian word vermicelli is means little worms. So it's something just to bear in mind next to him. Vermicelli noodles, big worms. So vermicomposting. This is the is the art of using worms to do indoor composting. Why would you want to do this? Well, for many reasons. For people who live in apartments and other situations where they would rather not have their organic matter become a waste product and end up in landfills where it does basically nothing. It could end up becoming something, even if you don't end up using it yourself. So it's a really convenient, easy way to mitigate what would otherwise be waste. So that being said, kind of go over the basics. So today we're going to be covering the worm bin approach to vermicomposting. There's many different techniques. Actually, Corey brought a really cool example of a little mini, kind of like tabletop approach to doing vermicomposting. There's a lot of ways to do it. So yeah, we'll pass it around.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah, we'll pass it around here shortly. So vermicomposting, it's a really, really easy way to, again, to mitigate what would be waste and to turn that into really incredibly nutrient-rich soil and tea. That's just a nice way to call it worm poop and worm pee, basically. So that being said, we'll go over the basics here. So the type of worms that we're going to be using to do this kind of composting are known as red wigglers, which are a tropical species of worms, and what they do, what makes them very different from our Michigan night crawlers and earthworms and these kind of things, is that they don't just go down deep in the soil and stay there, because the earthworms we have here in Michigan go deep down in the soil and they try to keep cool, and then they'll come up when we have rains and these kind of things. These worms are constantly going up and down, and they're constantly eating all the organic matter that you give them. So they really have a really high turnout rate as far as your inputs to your outputs. So that being said, let's cover some basic materials. So what we're using here are two, I guess these are 10-gallon Rubbermaid containers, and you want to make sure that these are opaque first of all, because one of the things that worms don't like is light. Because if you think about the sunlight, you think about how many times you've seen worms after rainfall, and the ones that didn't make it back in the soil are all dried up on your pavement. You don't want that to happen. Also, then they don't want to be exposed to air too for the same reason. So the reason why we have two of these containers in this particular approach is to capture the tea, or the worm pee as they produce the stuff. So so you have one vessel that's going to be used for all the compost or the caca, and then one for the tea. So what you want to do first of all is you'll get yourself the basic tools you're going to need is you're going to need a drill. You can use a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch bit. In this case, I just use all 1/4 inch. A lot of things I've seen on the web say to use 1/2 inch for doing ventilation towards the top, but 1/4 inch I think is just as suitable. So the first step you want to do is you'll take your bin and you want to do 8 to 12 holes in the bottom. This is for drainage, to allow all the tea to flow into the stuff to go below. And then you'll take your drill bit and drill along the upper edge of the bin, and this is going to be for ventilation, because the worms need to have some degree of air inside of here. So you see I did it all around here. And that basically gives you the ventilation and the drainage you need for your worms to be able to get set up. And then, of course, your other bin here is going to be for the tea and stuff to go in. So, and next you're also going to need, you can use like a yogurt container and cut that in half. Dana actually happened to have these handy. And actually, mind you, this is kind of interesting too. I was going to go out and buy all these materials to do this demonstration today, but it turns out Dana actually had all of these materials right here in the house. So this could be stuff that you actually have already. You might actually have a couple bins sitting around that are waiting to use. So, keep that in mind when you go about doing something like this. You can see what kind of resources you have. If you do have to go out and buy them, It'll cost you maybe $10 to get the 2 containers for the lids. You're only actually going to use 1 lid, which actually I forgot to mention here. Your cover here, you're going to want to drill a bunch of holes in here, 30 or so holes at the top. And again, this is just for ventilation. So,
when you say G,
yes.
Is that a fancy term, or is that? What does that mean?
That is the established term, but it's worm pee.
Okay.
Yeah. It's, and actually, a quick note on that too, just to make mention about this. I was doing a little when doing research on this whole presentation. I had come across some information that said that it's actually best to recirculate the tea after it's collected in a container back in through the soil, because the worms will take it in through their digestive system and actually will basically inoculate it with whatever kind of flora they have going on in their body, and actually make it more biologically active and beneficial for your plants. It's also very concentrated too, so you wouldn't want to add like a big, you wouldn't want to fill a container like this and dump it into your house plant, because it's so rich in nitrogen and these kind of things. You want to dilute it. Usually it's like I think like a 10 to 1 ratio, so 10 parts water to 1 part tea. But we'll touch upon that more later. So these little deals here, these are going to be used to put inside of your bin. You place this inside of here. This is simply just to allow the top bin, the composting bin, to rest inside of here. That way it's not going to be making direct contact and clogging everything up here. Now, you may be thinking right now, well, if there's all these holes in here, the worms are going to get out. That's a very logical thing to think about. That being said, actually, the reason the worms aren't going to do that is because if you have all the conditions necessary in that environment for them to be happy and healthy, if it's a hospitable environment, they're going to stay in their place as long as you keep feeding them. If something changes in the soil, say if something starts to rot, or there's anaerobic bacteria taking place inside there, then the worms are going to try to leave. And you'll notice that when you go to take the lid off and they're like crawling off like crazy, and then they're all freaked out. That's probably a sign that maybe something's in balance. But we'll touch upon the particulars of that later on. So we've got our bin set up here. So let's take this on the floor so it's easier for everybody to see.
So the bottom bin has nothing done.
Exactly, correct. Yeah, good point. The bottom bin is just as is, because if you did that, it's just
one giant hole in the bottom of the bottom bin, right?
Yeah, exactly. So now
coming up here.
Prep this.
He decided to go on the floor.
You'll need shredded paper. You can use newspaper because that's copiously available everywhere. It's one of the biggest waste products we have. You could go to like places like Starbucks, these kind of places where they're going to routinely throw away their old newspapers every day or every other day. So you can tell them, hey, I want to get some newspaper, and they'll most likely hold on to that for you. You can also, as another note for feeding your worms, the worms can eat spent coffee grounds and the filters that come with that. You can also collect those from your local coffee shops and these kind of places. So basically what we're going to be doing here first to get your house ready for your worms is you're going to want to get your cardboard soaked. Your paper soaked. So now the idea is you want it to be moist, but you want it to be soaking wet. So what we're going to do here is just simply we're going to start loading up the paper in here and just kind of let it soak a bit, and we'll wring it out. You basically want it as damp as like a damp like rag or something like that. You don't want it to be like sopping wet, because worms like moisture, but we'll go back to the example of like a rainy day. I mean, you'll see worms leaving the soil when it gets to be too wet in there, because it's hard for them to breathe, because they breathe through their skin. So
Why are they 1-inch strips?
Pardon?
Why are they 1-inch strips?
Why they cut into strips like that and 1-inch strips? It's easier for the worms to break things down. That's a good point there. You think about just kind of the basics in composting anyways. You don't want to throw like whole pieces of cardboard in your compost pile and hope that it's all going to break down. Worms, I guess, are in a similar fashion. They don't want to have this whole big mess of stuff for them to get through. If you just put like layers upon layers of sheets of newspaper inside of there, you're going to end up with this big, thick, nasty mess that the worms will be able to get through. So like I said, we'll wring this out and we'll place this inside the bin.
So you're trying to increase the surface area of the...
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's in short, we're trying to increase surface area. So we're going to place this material in here. Put this back up here so you can see this a little bit better. So we'll just we'll keep loading up all this material here, and the point is to basically fill this bin up, you know, a good 5 or 6 inches.
So the newspaper is just a medium, it's not a feed, it doesn't feed them?
It will provide a food source for them because they will eat paper products and these kind of things. But this is sort of just like bedding, I guess you could say, kind of like as you would have with like, you know, like a rat or a hamster or something like that.
Like the stuff you buy in the store for saving worms for your fishing. You know, they sell those bags of, it kind of looks like shredded newspaper.
Sure, yeah, exactly, good point there, yeah. So you'll also want to bear in mind to make sure to keep this material kind of like fluffy, so you're not like compacting it, just kind of keep it loose, and that allows for kind of aeration and keeps things from getting damp and stuck together there. So we'll just keep going on with this. And again, we're going to try to get to that 6-inch mark here. So
anything to stay away from in particular with paper?
Yeah, you know, it's a good question. I'm personally really not really well versed on all the particulars about toxic inks and these kind of things. I do know that nowadays most ink that's used in printing and these kind of things within newspapers is soy based. So technically speaking, it's
zinc.
It's
safer, but zinc.
Pardon?
It's mainly zinc. The ink in newsprint?
Zinc.
Yeah, zinc. Zinc's a mineral.
So there we go. So zinc is.
I don't know about the colored inks, but the black ink is zinc.
The colored ink, you know, I would actually like to talk to, you know, someone at the local press and see if they know anything about that, because that would be a good point to bring up.
I know in the sheet mulching books they recommend not using like printed cereal boxes and things like that, but I think that's a little different than new. Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, if you're concerned that
That's with the pulp and the paper process.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And acidity
Just
level?
some of the new quality, the chemicals used in the process, it must make some sort of acetate or something, I'm guessing then. And also too, you could theoretically use, you know, you could use shredded cardboard too. You could do the same thing, shred it into one strips. Leaves too, yeah, sure, definitely, yeah, leaves. Yeah, and I guess in this case we're using newspaper today because this would be something which is readily available in an urban environment. So, you know, if you live in a city or whatever, this is going to be something that, you know, Starbucks and other such places are going to be throwing away all the time. So,
You can also use like shredded office paper.
Sure.
Computer ink still petroleum based.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some. I mean, it depends who you talk to, but a lot of I've heard that the humic acid that's produced through the composting process can bind some of the like heavy metals and different things that can become toxic. So there is, you know, like a lot of, if you look at soil remediation, a lot of times the main thing you do is add compost, because the more life there is, the more biological activity there is to kind of like capture things that can become pollution.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you want to throw another, hey George.
Seat back there. Hey man. Woo! Hi Jordan.
That's a good point though. Yeah, because that does raise a good important issue, because, you know, that's one of the things we have to consider in our world today is how we're going to remediate a lot of the crap that we introduce in the environment. So that being said, Paul Stamets, who's kind of considered the mushroom guru of the world of mycology today, he just kind of gets all the good press, but he's a big advocate of what's known as mycoremediation. That's, you know, basically the use of mushrooms. In one case, he did oyster mushrooms. He was commissioned by some company to, I forget the name of the company, but him and like 6 or 7 other companies were commissioned by this company to basically try these different techniques to remediate all this contaminated soil that had been. It came from an old lot where all these trucks and stuff are coming through. So there was all this diesel contamination there, and he used oyster mushrooms in his trial, in his particular case, to remediate the soil, and they actually had tremendous results. He actually completely remediated all the petroleum products that are in there. Basically, all the oyster mushrooms basically broke down all the oil hydrocarbons in there and converted it into basically a neutral product. And actually, his pile, after I think 6 or so weeks, was like this haven for all this life. There was, birds were bringing in seeds and stuff, and there was grasses growing and worms crawling through there. So, and I guess you could possibly integrate mushrooms into the worm composting thing if you do it in the right proportions, because mushrooms can kind of digest hot and worms don't like chemically hot environments, I guess. But if you happen to be a mushroom cultivator, or if you have mushroom products, you could probably introduce that into there as well. So, which actually I have an example I can show you in a minute here. So kind of get to the point almost where we can.
Another reason I like to use like these products is like, what else are you gonna do with it? It's gonna go somewhere else and end up in a greater quantity somewhere else, and when it's in a great quantity, that's when the pollution really starts to become a big factor. So taking care of it on a small scale like this, hopefully your concoction of organisms can help to remediate the small percentage of contaminants that are in the newspaper or off of the
Great point. Even if you recycle the newspaper, that truck's got to drive, and your waste, so you're doing it on site and keeping it local.
Exactly, yeah, and then there's all the energy that goes in the recycling process. And I'm not particularly well versed. I won't claim to be an expert on the subject, but the things I've read, the whole recycling process seems to involve more energy to turn it back into paper and these kind of things. So I think small, slow solutions like this are suitable. And who knows? Maybe there'll be some evidence that shows that that phytoremediation, meaning bacterial soil things in bacteria in the soil, could actually help to mitigate these kind of things that are found in all these products that we're creating. Nature always has the one up on us, and plus all the stuff came from nature anyway. So it's ashes to ashes, dust to dust, I guess.
They're saying the solution to pollution is dilution. Dilute the ethics words.
Yeah.
Say it again.
I think. Isn't that Dow's mantra?
Is that a Captain Planet?
Following all the waters. So, all right, we're getting close here. So a little bit of cleanup involved with this, but any good project is worth being worth. Yeah, a little bit of mess,
So you were saying not to use shredded printer?
You can.
You can.
Okay.
Yeah. This again, I'm just using this tonight because it was kind of what's on hand, and it's a product that it's going to be a waste product.
Anyway.
All over the place. I mean, newspapers. Your neighbors are going to probably be throwing out their recycling bins. So you could even just go fetch their stuff.
Actually, technically, these are Bob McGowan's newspapers that he gave me like a year ago for sheet mulching. I didn't use them all, and I had them in my barn. Do you
I thought I saw your handwriting.
Yeah, you see that? But, so, even if you want this kind of stuff, you can ask around. And
so there we go.
If you don't get newspapers yourself,
And that's
Yeah. Like cups like this have like the wax coating.
good question.
They've composted for me.
Yeah, we've composted in our, because we do vermicomposting at home. We have actually 2 bins. We have this style, and we have a tower that we bought as a commercially produced one. I would have wrapped it in as a pain in the butt to bring it out here. But it's like it's a little tower system that's got a bunch of holes in there, and similar approach to this, except you just keep, adding stuff up and stacking the worms and keep going through there. I think this is just a more of an appropriate solution, and actually tonight I think it's appropriate too, because again we're using all these materials are already here. The bins are already here, the paper's here from Bob, and I think it kind of fits with the principles of permaculture design and holistic design and all these kind of things. So I think it's permaculture approved,
And if you buy the towers, they'll try and sell you the coconut core, shredded coconut core, which is really unsustainable to ship to Michigan. So
you might as well be eating coconuts, not the so, good point there, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say avoid the gimmicks. As appealing as one of those worm towers might be, when we bought it, I think we were just interested in just trying another system out. But I think these other systems allow homeowners and apartment owners, renters and stuff to to take a more of a cost-effective approach to doing the exact same thing. And I think actually this may have more merits in of its own right than doing this other approach. So almost there. So does anybody have any questions at this point about the whole process or?
How do you
I'm
I'm
gonna do it about.
You like tell me that?
Yeah, sorry. Here you go.
Do you want
Let me see that.
like an assistant while you talk?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure.
Sure, it's all you.
Are you volunteering?
Now that you're done, you want that?
It's almost
Close.
yeah. So yeah, we're gonna get it to about like, 7, 8 inches or so. You could basically we're gonna be going like up to here, to this. Everybody see that? Can we see that there? Sorry. Everybody see that?
Hey, Paul, let me see it.
We had between
Got it,
8
thanks.
to 12 holes at the bottom. And just an FYI, I'm going to be uploading the instructions, the detailed instructions on the Permaculture Meetup's Facebook page.
And I'll have the video once I
Dana's gonna have
edit.
footage, I don't know if that'll end up there anytime soon.
No, it'll happen. I'm sorry, I'm just busy. It'll happen.
Well, data side is not no judgment. Any other questions?
I have a question. Are there any foods that are not good to feed the worms?
Yeah, good question. Well, yeah, actually, let's go into that right now since we're doing this. So, okay, here's the things that you do want to feed your worms, things you don't want to feed your worms. Okay, we'll go with the don'ts, I guess, and then that'll kind of eliminate it, and then everything else will be easy. So you don't want to feed your worms fats, meat, oil, cheese and other dairy products, anything citrus, and anything spicy. Worms can't tolerate citrus and spicy things because they have a very sensitive digestive tract. Onions, alliums, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, although we have thrown ours in there, but we tend to put the skins in there, our onion pieces in it, don't our chickens. But good point though. Yeah, the alliums as well too, because it's kind of caustic, volatile oils that are present in the alliums too. But yeah, so again, so no dairy of any sort, no cheese, no dairy products, no oils, no fats, no meat, no citrus, and no onions. That basically opens up virtually everything that a lot of us end up having, at the end of the day after all of our days cooking and stuff. So, yes?
So is that anything that you would normally put in a regular compost? Like nothing cooked, right?
Oh, no, cooked stuff's fine.
Oh, really? For worms, it's okay?
Yeah, definitely. That's perfectly fine. Again, if it's cooked in oil, it won't be a big deal so long as it's got other stuff to go with it. I guess when I say no oil, you don't want to be dumping spent olive oil from making French fries or something like that. So cool, thank you. Exceptions of citrus, hits of stone fruits and these kind of things might be a little bit tricky for them to break down. So you may want to consider putting those in your composters.
Grow
them. Or grow them. Better yet, yeah. Or give them to Trevor. Put them in his nursery. So yeah, that kind of covers the food portion of things there. So now we've got our worm bin filled up to the appropriate level to start putting our worms in here. So there is kind of a strategy about how you want to go about doing this. So all the research I've been doing indicates that really the best strategy to feed your worms is not to just dump all the compost in here. So what you actually really want to do is you're going to want to actually pull some of the bedding back, and then get it kind of close to the bottom, and a few inches at the bottom, and then you want to place your food scraps for the day in there. A little quick formula, and again, this is going to be covered in the handout or the printout on the website. You'll want to consider output to input. So say for instance, you have about half of a pound of food scraps every day that you're putting out. So in order to be able to get all that fully digested within a proper time frame, you want to make sure you have a pound of worms. So it's about half to double that for your worms. So if you have half a pound of food, you want to have a pound of worms to help to break that down, because worms will typically break down about half their body weight in food products each day. And the strategy is basically what you can do is you'll do it in sections. So you'll say you put one in this corner this day, and then the next day you'll put it next to that. What can be helpful, one of the things I've seen that seems like a good way to do it, on top of your lid, you can tape a piece of paper on there that's divided into 8 equal sections. And then what you do? Oh, this is it. Brothers are handy. So
Making my job hard though.
Yeah, much easier. So yeah, so you have your little grid on top if that's convenient for you to have a big piece of paper divided into 8 equal sections. So day 1, you deposit food in here, and again, you want to cover it shallow. You don't want to bury it way deep in the bottom because that could cause it to create anaerobic bacteria. So bury it a little bit more shallow, cover it up, and then the worms always are going to go to the fresh food source. And then the next day you go to the next grid, and you can make it a note of the date that you did that. By the time you get back around to the first part, all that food that was deposited in there should be unrecognizable. If you see any bits of recognizable food, if there was like little bits of potato peels and these kind of things, you're going to want to wait a little bit. So maybe hold on your food scraps for another couple of days.
1 week.
Yes.
1 week. That's all.
8 days?
About 8 days, yeah.
Wow.
About 8 days. But it may take a little bit longer depending on your county. Bear in mind too, when you first start out, if you have, say, like if you just got like a handful of worms, because that's all somebody can spare for you, don't fret because worms reproduce very rapidly. They're kind of like rabbits, I guess, in terms of their reproduction rate. Within time, they'll have a really big colony, and then they'll be able to start to take on larger volumes of food. And I guess since we're on that note here, to kind of cover the time frame from which you can get your yield, it's usually anywhere from like 2 months to 3 months to have a finished product, meaning that all the material that you put inside of there will be completely digested, and then you can begin to separate, and that'll be another portion we'll cover here. So, so I guess at this point here, I'll show you an example then of our system. Yes, you have a question?
About a pound of worms in the beginning, so I deposit half a pound of waste every day.
Yeah.
I initially dump a pound in.
You can sit there.
They have babies.
No, I got it, Mark. Go ahead.
Yeah, but, okay, here's the thing, actually, that you actually make a good point there. You won't want to put in, say like if you had a pound of worms put in there right away, you may not want to go right ahead and put in that full half pound of food scraps, maybe do like a quarter of a pound or so. Start small, let the worms kind of get adapted, and then once they get adjusted to their environment, then you can add, so then if you had your half a pound every day, then you could add that, and then they'll kind of start to get up to speed, because again, they're going to constantly be reproducing all the time. They'll lay little cocoons, and then those will hatch, because actually interesting enough, worms are hermaphroditic, although sometimes they need to conjoin together to make more babies, but they can actually produce asexually, interestingly enough, so curious oddity of worms.
This is why we love them.
There's a really good video online. Worms mating.
Really?
It's actually by like a actor's studio, and they're in worm suits.
I think I've seen that one. Yeah. So now somebody has to get up here.
He's like a worm porn.
Yeah. I guess maybe Mark can assist me here. Yeah, maybe give me a hand. So this is our little worm at home. This is going to kind of we're going to learn a lot of lessons here. So this is ours in action. We're going to show you. This is some pros and cons to the thing. And this is actually really more about like things you shouldn't do, I guess, because we sort of
We're avant-garde.
We're a little avant-garde, I guess, in our style. It's, there's a potato in there, some sort of a grass that's growing in here.
One thing that should be mentioned is it's a really resilient system. So like,
is that fungus?
If you don't do it perfectly, the worms aren't. Unless if it's too wet, then they'll die. But if everything else is fine, they'll just eat everything you put in there.
Yeah, good point.
It may be slower or faster depending on how you do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, worms. Yeah, again, they don't like to be too dry. They don't like to be too damp, but they do need a moisture environment because we're dealing with tropical worms. They're used to being in more of a humid, damp environment. Now, actually on the top here too, for those in the front you can see this, but I have, there's spent,
What's growing?
This is spent mushroom spawn from one of the mushroom kits I sell at the farmer's markets. I threw that in there. That's definitely a potato, so that's the future food here. So yeah, here we can.
Give a hand.
Do you have like a container to put it in?
Yeah, Dan,
Where are those clear ones?
Adam, can you grab a container?
Is that the cold wet? No, you can. Good call.
No, I'm taking video. Adam, can you go grab a bowl or something from the kitchen?
Dave made a.
Oh, okay, never mind.
That's we're gonna get that in a minute here.
Okay.
So here's
That's the newspaper all broken down, right?
Yep. This is an example of finished product.
Yeah.
Mind you, this isn't like a perfect example.
Announcements.
Ours, because we're a little more avant-garde about our approach, this soil turned out a little more damp, but you can see it's super dark and rich, and that's just packed full of all the nutrients your garden needs. Now, so if you recall earlier, I was talking about how the tea is really concentrated. You don't want to add that, you know, and undiluted into your water and can, these kind of things. The soil is kind of similar too, but it's not as powerful. But you can use it as an amendment. It's a really, really great amendment. So like say if you have like roses or something like that, you can mix that into the soil media for your potted roses or something like that. And you're gonna have terrific results. Or you could also sprinkle it on the top, kind of plant around the base of the rose, and then when you go to water it, all those nutrients are gonna seep into the root system. In case any of you are wondering, this system is not going to stink up your house or your apartment or what have you if you do it right. It's not going to create nasty foul odors that are going to scare off your loved ones or significant others. It shouldn't do that. If you're doing everything right, then the result should be a neutral odor. And if anything, actually might even smell kind of nice, you know, kind of have that nice, rich sort of autumnal, earthy, sweet aroma. So this system we've had going here for what, like, what would you say, 2, 3, 4, 5? Okay, a long time, yeah, 5 years. It seems like yesterday. You know, we kind of stagger ours out a little bit more because again we're kind of avant-garde. So don't do the way we do it, but try to do it according to the rules and then see how it works. But we've had great results.
Do you sprinkle water on top of it occasionally if it gets dry or no?
You can, but it's not necessary because yeah, if you have the right conditions for it, then the moisture cycle should kind of be a constant thing. The worms, as they're breaking down all this material, will help to keep anything from rotting and keep everything just kind of. You can actually. That's a good point. Yeah, you could. And I actually encourage you all to try this out too, just to see if maybe get better results. Maybe run a trial when it comes time to harvest the tea. Pour off some of the stuff into a container, and then pour the rest of it in another container and dump that back into your worm bin, and just try it out to see if you get better results. Maybe try, say if you had 2 potted roses, again, use that as an example. Try one with the straight tea that hasn't gone recirculated, and then try it again with the other stuff that's been recirculated, and see if maybe there's any different results. Everything I've been reading on the web seems to indicate that by having it kind of recirculated once more, then the worms are going to be able to introduce their beneficial flora that it's kind of there, but it helps to recirculate it. And it's kind of, I guess, what would already be happening in nature because we're doing sort of a contained thing here. So
yeah, I do. So you mentioned the 8-day things. We do this for 8 days. What happens after 8 days? Do we just do it again?
Yeah, keep things going. Yeah, just provided that when you get back to the place you started at, again, you want to make sure that all that food that you deposited before is basically unrecognizable. So
it's dirt.
Yeah, basically it's going to be soil, more or less.
Okay.
And it may take a little bit longer than that.
Okay.
It may be that it's, 12 days or something like that.
Okay.
There's no real fixed hard and fast formula for that. So, yes, Dan?
Like I break the rules and just put all the food on top because I feel concerned that if I scoop in with something that I'll mash some worms. But I like your idea of the wet paper, because I think that it would be within my ability to, put the paper on top and pull it apart and put stuff in there. So I think I'll try that. But it's quite flexible. I just tried putting it all completely on top, and they at least have, continued their generations over the years. One thing that didn't work was I've got a different type of composting system, which is 3 bins. And it's got legs and a little spigot. You buy it, and it costs $100 and some. If I sit it in the sun and the sun shines on it, it has overheated. So now I cover it up with. I've got kind of this thing rigged up so that it can't overheat. It's sort of like an umbrella over it.
Right.
But don't set it in the sun, even though it doesn't get light. If it's got the top on it, it can overheat.
That's a good point. Yeah, because you want to make sure your worms, again, because they're temperature sensitive and they're moisture sensitive. So Well, I guess we'll get into that more when we talk about storage bay. You want to make sure you don't ideally keep them in direct sunlight because they're going to be cooking inside of there. They have this dark soil which is going to trap all that heat and stuff. So so you had a Wally?
How do you know when they're they're reproducing inside your container?
Right.
How do you know when you need to start a new container
Good question. Yeah. Sort of the basic formula is that about every 2 months to 3 months, the worms will have basically done all the work they can do with the given materials that you have for them. And then around that time, you'll begin a harvesting process, which we'll cover here in a little bit. But yeah, basically at that point, then you can start fresh. I've actually seen systems too where you have actually a 3-tier system. And that's maybe not really necessary, but you could have your second layer, for your tea, and then the third layer could be ready to deploy when you want to start another batch. You basically would do what we did here with this one. You'll give them all the fresh newspaper and all this kind of stuff, and then you can put that bucket of the finished material on top, and then eventually, when you put your food in there, they'll go down to that.
Let me say this, if say they double in weight, you start off with a half a pound or a pound.
Yeah.
At one point there's maybe 2 pounds or close to that. Do you have to feed it more? I mean, because the half pound won't feed it then, would it?
Not necessarily. I guess
that's a good question.
That's a very good question. You wouldn't really have to necessarily increase your volume of food because again, this kind of depends on what you're going to do each day. Worms don't really starve because there'll still be stuff that's in the soil they can recirculate. And they'll continuously breed their stuff, I guess.
Do they adjust their population according to lower food? And just don't.
Oh yeah. They're actually really self-correcting, I guess, by nature. They don't really they won't overproduce to the rate where it won't be like rabbits where there's just too damn many of them where you can start shooting them, Yeah, humans, yeah, well, don't want to, so I know you're we know their limits, I guess you could say, better than we do, so. And real quick, you were next?
Yeah, I was wondering in terms of cold temperature, so we talked about hot temperature that they can bake in, but in cold temperature, what temperature do they freeze? Can they be in the garage? Can they be outside in the bin?
Good question, yeah. I guess we'll jump into the storage thing real quick then. So storage, you do want to keep these things indoors. I personally haven't tried experimenting with them outdoors, mainly just because the indoor environment offers so many benefits because it's, if you have it in an area where you have a stable temperature, so it's in your kitchen, it's going to be a temperature constant environment. You don't really have to worry about major dips and stuff in the temperature. I would advise against keeping it in a place where it's going to drop down, below 50 degrees or something like that. Even though the internal temperature would be pretty warm because they kind of produce their own heat through the digestive process. But again, because they are from a tropical origin, you want to kind of make sure they're going to be more of a temperature stable environment like that. So, but that's a good question there.
I have a couple real world examples. Last year I found out that it's best to either, with your inputs, if you're putting like banana peels or tropical fruit, freeze it or microwave it, and that zaps any fruit flies or anything like that. So I tried it inside and all these little even aphids started attacking my seedlings because I had it in the same room. That's something I learned that's informative. And, so this year I put them in my garage, which is not heated. I don't think it's much insulated very well.
Right.
And when it first started getting cold, funny enough, I think I had a die-off of the adults, but the cocoons and babies were still in there. And I started reading on it, and the current adults, they have a very hard time of adjusting to their environment. So if there's an extreme temperature or something like that, but the cocoons, they adapt. So I think I just checked my worm bin and they repopulated already. So basically right now I have a seed heating mat in my garage, very low voltage, but it keeps it warm enough to keep them happy. And it's, I've been playing around with it, but in between like 50 or 70 degrees. But try to keep it as low as possible, but yeah. So.
Okay, so you've done yours in your garage and had.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. It's enclosed and there seems to be enough insulation to keep them happy. So.
Right.
There we go. In my garage and they live just through the winter.
Okay. There we go. Yeah, and And I guess the material, the information I've given you is just kind of just throw the general cautionary notes, but that's a good point though, definitely.
Of course, it's on the wall next to the house, you know, so it's on the one. I haven't tried it out, you know, towards the doors or anything.
Yeah.
You know, it's next, I keep it next to the wall.
Okay.
The house where it's warmer anyway. They seem to, I mean, they stop eating so much, you know, they stop, you know, so I had to not throw as much food in there because they don't eat it all. They're all huddling down in the center. It seems like they're doing what you said they're doing. So I had to slow down feeding them, but they made it through the winter.
Okay, very good, very good. And Dave, you had ours? Yeah, we've had lots of fruit flies in there. I guess really the best way to mitigate that is just to try to maintain the best practices and try to kind of make sure you're not overfeeding them because that would leave room for any of the materials exposed to the surface. Mushroom stuff, yeah, that's probably going to attract them too, but I guess they'll come most of the end too. So. Actually, at this point here, let's this is what we're talking about. Let's pass around. This is Corey brought this along here tonight. So this is his mini thing. So I think this is a genius design. And think about how many of these things end up going into recycling, you know, and become waste. I think this is an awesome idea. How long have you been doing that for?
Corey, is that basically the same setup?
Yeah.
So I could put one of those in my office.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So
Sweet.
You know, I have holes into it, and there's nothing, you know, it all collects at the bottom. But every now and then I you know, transfer it to make sure that there's a lot of warranty or anything.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I had one of those going. It was my first experiment, and you know, failed experiment and you know, valuable lesson learned. I had one about twice as big, and it was way too wet in there, and it created an anaerobic environment, and it zapped the worms immediately. So the smaller one seems to work better for me, and I put more holes in it to keep it a little bit.
Yeah, and you.
What's that?
Is there another insert?
No, there's not that one.
But you could just feed it every day with the coffee grounds that your colleagues drink. This is awesome.
That's what I do. I go to work
and the coffee?
I'm the nerd that dumps the coffee, and people look at me funny. I'm like, I don't really care.
This is so perfect because that,
That thing's half full of used coffee.
It's perfect.
I
Wow.
absolutely love it. I know you talked about coffee.
With the amount of coffee, do you worry about do you worry about the acidity? You can add eggshells to wear that down.
But if you don't give them the coffee grounds, they like to have a caffeine kick.
They work very hard.
So,
That
is something I should mention is that the you know, the way they chew is through their gizzards. So I put a little sand in mine so they can eat that in their gizzard. They can do their thing, or you know, if you're doing it in the summertime, just some outside soil will work. But
yeah, that's a good point actually. Well, I'll be covering that here in a second. Yeah, because worms are kind of like chickens in that respect because they need to have some sort of mineral, you know, like sand like that to help break down the materials that they're churning in through their tracts. Another interesting little fun fact about worms, I learned that they apparently never sleep. Always eating, always hungry. They're like bees, I guess. You know, they're very industrious creatures. Politics and worms. So we can learn a lot from nature, can't we? So is this making sense to everybody so far? Is everybody clear?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Woo!
good. Awesome.
Yeah.
Any questions? Any comments at this point you'd like to address?
I have a question.
Yes.
Could you mix different species of worms in your worm farm?
That's a really good question. Actually, I would say it's best to stick with just single species. So stick with your red wigglers. You know TDA, something like that. And then there's actually I've learned more recently too. I have a friend who has he used to own a worm composting company, and they used I forget the name of the species. Perhaps maybe you might know, Corey. But there's this one. It's apparently the biggest composting worm. They're kind of like the size of earthworms apparently, and they're really vigorous producers of compost. And these are used in like commercial operations where they have people have these big bins set up. And apparently you get much bigger turnarounds like that. I personally haven't had any experience with them. I would like to try them. If anybody knows where to get them, I would be interested in trying that out.
Another idea is manure worms. You know, that's a natural species, and you know, we could probably like have two bins and kind of compare how they do, and that'd be a cool little thing.
That's a great idea.
Because these are really tropical species, right? So I don't know.
You called them manure?
Native worms if they get mixed, but
I don't know. I don't know what species it is, but in my compost piles I've seen like these small like
Oh, look at it.
but they're like in the surface of the compost.
Can you see the worms in there?
And they're fast too. Yeah. So
Is there a tomato in there?
What do you know about manure worms?
Cool. Oh, that toilet paper roll.
Last summer,
That's awesome.
7 yards of
I
manure
can stick it in my bathroom.
Sweet. So I got to learn all about that last summer.
Go ahead, pass it on.
Yeah, the worms in there were just crazy, and I actually put some of them in my worm bin, and I might have to check it to see if they're different worms because I just wanted to try it out. But just they kind of, if you play around with your worms, they're like really active, and these were kind of had that same behavior. So
are you the one that called them manure worms? You just kind of making that
up? Okay, we got it on video. It's okay.
Speaking of manure worms, I had a friend. His main use for his red wiggler worms is to compost human manure. So they can digest a large variety of inputs. There's actually systems you can buy that are specifically for dog too.
That's a good point.
I think it's the same species.
Yeah, it is.
They eat,
Isenia capita.
They eat so many different, they just want organic matter. So.
Do you guys worry about when you harvest them to single out your worms so you don't take them out and sprinkle them around your bushes? You worry about them getting out into the environment?
Not too much.
They're already out there.
They're already out there.
They already destroyed our ecosystem.
But I put it this way. If they don't burn down quick enough when it starts to get cold, they will die off. So come towards the fall or something like that, and they die off. But that does raise a good question. Without getting too much into the debate of native versus non-native, because I think humans are the I don't know. It's a tough question, but I think if we're going to point fingers at any species being invasive, I think we probably are the most invasive species on the planet. We'll stray away from that a little bit. So getting back to the bin here.
That's like
if I could get my assistant to come back here and help me. Okay, so hold it up, please. So, alright, so what we're going to do next is, now we're going to add that grit that we were talking about. So you can use soil, sand, in this case we're using, is this compost? Sand?
Yeah, it's some compost.
Okay, there we go.
Some finished compost, obviously.
There we go, perfect. So, we're just going to sprinkle this in here. Actually, we can fill it up a little bit more. It's, like this. Yeah, like that. There we go. Cool. So, just broadcast this through here. This is again, we're just like grit. We're just getting the grit through the worms.
Yeah, they have gizzards.
Really? Didn't mean to do that.
Okay, and lastly, now we're gonna add our worms. So this is kind of the crowning part here.
So you just pulled a bunch of worms out of your worm bin, and you're just gonna give them.
These are actually worms that came from Jared originally, which came from Dan.
Sweet.
That's what I was going to ask. How do you get your first?
Since we're talking worms now, let's.
You can order them online.
Yeah.
It's like $26 a pound now.
Yeah.
Like, it's really getting expensive.
Yeah, don't bother doing that.
So we have worms in this community.
For 25 a pound.
There we go.
Did you get that on camera?
Yeah, I got it. But you already offered free worms earlier.
Oh.
Sales over. Yeah, sales over.
Gardens Alliance sells them, I know that through
Yeah.
Canada.
Okay.
You can buy them or you can just get them from the
I'm gonna pass around a little bowl of these worms so everybody can get a chance to actually see these things up close.
So you sort out your adults and your babies, right?
Not particular. I mean, not. I guess not as thoroughly as I could. I mean, you can do that because yeah, they do. There will be a point where that will happen. You can sort them out. And that kind of ties in like when you're getting towards when actually you're gonna harvest all the materials. So when you're gonna harvest the castings and the tea and all this kind of stuff. That's when you can do that. Since we can't really demonstrate it right now, I'll talk about it. So say, okay, we're gonna harvest now. So you're at the end of your, 2 or 3 months or whatever it is, still everything's all broken down. So you could use, say, like a plastic table like this, or some other kind of surface that you don't mind getting dirty and kind of wet and stuff. And you can take your soil and you'll spread it out kind of like a cone shape and pile it up high, so you have high peaks. And the techniques I've seen to make a lot of sense is you'll have one container for your worms and then another container for all your finished soil. And you can just pick the soil off the top, because what's happening is all the worms are going to be burrowing down because there's light and air that they're being exposed to, so they're automatically going to seek shelter. So you just gently remove all the soil off the top there, and then as you go along, just try to remove your worms and stuff out of there. And then you can, if you can distinguish between your cocoons and all the babies and stuff, you can try to separate those two, or just keep them with the rest of the worms, and they'll just keep going on and making merry. That process does take a little bit of time. So you want to, if you get some time on the weekend or something like that, you can spend a couple hours to do it. But bear in mind, it's going to be totally worth it because, well, first of all, you can give yourself a big pat on the back because you've made your own compost in your own house. You haven't really had to do anything. You just let the worms do all the work, really. But it may seem like a small thing, but that little tiny action makes a big difference in the world, because if one person does that, that's one less bag of garbage that's going to be going on every week that's going to end up in the landfill. That's not going to do any good for any of us. It's going to, except for making a ski resort, 30 years from now. Or Great Lakes Crossing, for that matter, which built on pile of garbage. If anybody doesn't worry about that, it's appropriate enough. Talk about appropriate thing.
Bottom line is the organisms in the soil just love it.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So
that's the reason for it.
Yeah. So we're mitigating waste, and we're increasing biodiversity on the micro scale. We're getting all the little happy, friendly critters back in our soil that our plants love.
It gives better nutrition to us down the line because you've got all the systems that are working together in order for maximum efficiency and absorption and so forth.
Exactly. Yeah. You're going to be making things easier for our future generations too by kind of cultivating these practices, and we teach the young people this stuff. And before your whole neighborhood's doing this stuff. Maybe they'll have maybe they'll have parties every couple months, and you bring your bins together and everybody separates their materials, and you have worm themed cocktails and that stuff.
Are you proposing a meetup in the future?
I'm not opposed to that.
Vermicomposters meetup?
Yeah, sure. Anybody have a question?
I have a question.
Trevor, yeah.
So the finished product is going to be a lot stronger than regular compost, is that right?
It is, yes, correct. Yeah, you bring up a good point. It's going to be more concentrated. If I recall correctly, it's not really going to be like hot, like horse manure or whatever. Like obviously when it's finished, horse manure and other animal manure is going to be good, but it's going to be very.
Burn the plants.
Yeah, it won't burn the plants. Yeah, it's not going to. Yeah, so you could add any amount to it. Matter of fact, I've grown plants in the past. For my friend's company, he gave me all these bags of the compost for the worm castings to try out, and I planted the whole plants in there, like basil and stuff. And the results were amazing. I mean, the plants were just lush and vibrant, and they were just happy as can be. So you're only going to get great results from that. And you could also take that tea, as was mentioned before, and you could say if you happen to have a backpack sprayer, if you make sure if it's filtered out properly, because you want to make sure there's nothing that's going to get caught in the stream, you could use it in your backpack sprayer and go around and spray your property like that. Or you could just simply add that into your watering can and just add that in your plants. Or if you want to just get some more of these little microscopic critters in your land, go around with your watering can and apply it wherever you think would be beneficial. But that's a really good point there. Definitely, it's the product is going to be much stronger, but as Wally indicated, it's not going to burn your plants as far as the soil. But the tea again, you're going to want to dilute that, and that's once again, that's roughly 10 parts of water to 1 part of the tea. So, you know, if you're dealing with, you know, 2 cups, then you're going to do that to, you know, your 10 cups of water. So,
I've heard of people actually brewing compost tea with the finished worm castings as well.
Yeah, we've tried that out before too. Yeah, and I think that's a great thing to try out.
That could be another demonstration.
Yeah. Compost tea, aerated compost tea. That's a whole other really cool world because I mean that's where you can take these kind of products, and you can really amplify that stuff. You know, you can take this alchemical process that's going on, and you can really you can potentiate it and make it something even greater. So what better way to learn about alchemy? You know, you're taking base matter and turning it into gold, black gold in this case here. So
yeah.
So what do we think of the worms? Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, awesome.
Cool. They're tiny. They're cute. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, another question. So it's my understanding that these worms are not indigenous to this area, correct?
Correct, yes.
Can you help me understand why we would use these worms instead of worms that are indigenous to the area?
It's a really great question. Well, I'm not.
They're surface feeders.
Yeah, exactly.
They tried a lot of different
and these ones just are really gangbusters. I mean, because they're constantly churning, they're going up and down all the time. Again, our Michigan, you know, like crawlers and these kind of things, they're going to burrow deep down in the soil because they like it cold. Yeah, so they'll go to the surface from time to time, especially in rains. Of course, they'll go up there to get a breath of air. But yeah, they're going to burrow deep down in the soil to get cool and then come back up when they need food. But yeah, that's kind of their modus operandi. Whereas these things, their whole shtick is just constantly just eat and circulate.
What's their name?
Yeah, exactly. These are these are surface feeders. Yeah. Yep.
You could probably do it with native worms. It would just be a much slower process.
It would be much slower. Yeah.
Pass those wigglers.
Yeah. It's not to say that there aren't worms in Michigan that it's actually very possible that maybe in some part of our landmass here, there's some area of soil that has some indigenous worms that do the same thing. You know, it all takes for us for some curious person to dig up these worms and say, hey, these look like these composting worms, or they've been there at the site for a while and they see them doing all this stuff, then maybe they'll observe that. You know,
someone could spearhead a breeding.
Yeah, put a red worm with a native worm.
We tried 2 or 3 native species and they all died.
They all died, huh? Yeah.
And these things never die.
They seem to be immortal in their own way. Yeah, that's a good point. And who knows? Maybe I don't know. Maybe Jared, maybe you might know. Is there any species that are in the Midwest region that are comparable to this? Is this kind of just what we have?
I have to look it up, but I haven't found any worthwhile. This is so much more efficient all around. It's a lot easier, and you know they're already in our environment everywhere.
Yeah, they're already here.
So I'd rather just use these.
Yeah, we might as well use what we have on hand because they're widely available. So if it works, it works. You know, it's I think it's one of the safer species to import, I guess, because you're not. It's already here, and it's not like something that's.
They won't survive.
I don't think it's not.
They're not going to take over.
Necessarily.